We are joined by Dan Murphy, ESPN, Craig Smoke and David Smoke and Paul Catalina. Dan, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much. So what is next in college sports? So waiting for anything else, more lawsuits, or when will all of this, if ever, calm down?
Hey, fellas, thanks for having me. No calm on the horizon quite yet. Still a lot yet left to be settled. But, I mean, what's up next is 2 weeks from now, we're going to have schools cutting checks directly to their athletes, which is a huge, major milestone for changing college sports. There's still a lot left to be decided of, basically this new settlement that got final approval about a week ago. Allows schools to pay their athletes directly and tries to put in place a bit of a salary cap to even the playing field. And to me, the biggest questions, which will probably be settled in the courtroom at some point, are basically whether or not schools are able to effectively enforce the salary cap.
Do you think that will be the thing that perhaps leads them to eventually collective bargaining, which solves all their problems?
If they can't figure it out legally, yeah, I think that gets us there. To me, there are two, there are a lot of different ways we get to it, but there are two main end destinations for when that calm might come in college sports. One of them, if you, are cheering for the players and the lawyers who represent players, is a collective bargaining agreement that looks at least something like the way things are structured in professional sports. If you're with the schools or with the NCAA right now, what they're pulling for is to have Congress step in and write a law that says, hey, we've done a lot for players right now. It's a little bit more fair. They're making plenty of money. Now we need to put some things in place to make sure this doesn't become professional sports. One of those two end solutions is probably where we're headed.
Dan, I mentioned this. Mack Rhodes, Baylor's director of athletics and now chairman of the college football playoff, is going to join us in studio tomorrow. I heard Arkansas AD Hunter Yurachek discussing now that players or athletes are getting paid, would athletic departments start to cut back on some of the amenities that the athletes have been able to get in the past, even like what they get for travel or food, etc. Have you heard that from anybody else?
Sure, I think there's an open question of, look, so this new salary cap is going to be $20.5 million starting this year, and it's only going to go up from there. And that money's got to come from somewhere. From the schools with really deep pockets, they can probably gather enough donors and circle the wagons and get some of that money. But for most colleges, it's going to mean making tough business decisions. And a lot of those amenities that you talked about, whether they're fancy locker rooms or, lobsters after big wins or whatever it may be, those are the old recruiting incentives, right? That's how you get a player to show up to the school when you can only offer him a scholarship. Now you don't need to do that as much. If you come with a bigger paycheck, you probably don't need the fancy locker room to land a play.
But wouldn't that be, they've got to be pretty judicious with that, especially when it comes to travel and everything, because the littlest thing can send you into the transfer portal. And also, this is their fault that they're in this position, not the players' fault. So why are you going to take something away from the players?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be an immediate downgrade to riding the bus like a single A baseball team or anything like that. There will be some teams that do this a lot differently and try to chip away at the budget in different ways. And I think one of the bigger fears that a lot of people in college sports have is that instead of coming, that the football team will still be treated very well, but some of those other sports will be downgraded and not quite have the same amenities or budget that they used to have or that they've enjoyed over the course of the last 10 or 20 years as the money in college sports has just skyrocketed.
So where are we then? And the timeline of the roster limits, and when does that kick in for those who were released early in the spring because they didn't know if there would be room for them, and some of them had a chance to come back? Has that all been settled?
Yeah, so we have an understanding of how that's going to look moving forward. So basically, as part of this settlement, the NCAA and the schools got together and said they want to have new limits on how big a team's roster can be. In the back and forth of trying to get to the finish line, the judge told them that whatever rules they put in place can't cost a current athlete his or her spot on the roster. So they have a way to sort of grandfather them in. So those athletes that may have lost their spot are not going to lose them anymore. And the schools have to basically submit a list to the NCAA by the end of this month on who's going to be their sort of special grandfathered in athletes. And then, basically leading up to the first day of the football season or the first day of fall sports season, the day before it is when teams have to be down to their new roster limits. So for football, that's going to be 105 players. So rather than having 125, 130 guys showing up at practice in September and October, you're going to have to get down to 105 before the start of the regular season. So we'll probably see some teams making some cuts after the first few weeks of training camp.
Do you feel like Title IX is just a bump in the road, or could this actually become like a heavy cholesterol inside somebody's heart?
I think it's one of a few major problems that could throw a big wrench in things here. Moving forward, most schools right now, of that $20.5 million we talked about, schools are planning to spend 75% or so of that on football players, another 10 to 15% on the basketball team if they got a good basketball program. And so that leaves at most 10% for female athletes, let alone, the baseball team or the lacrosse team, wherever else they want to put some money in the pockets of. So, depending on how you view this money and how it works, how you see it in the eyes of the law in Title IX, some people believe the money should be split, 50-50 between men and women. And that's going to invite some lawsuits. That's something that at some point, inevitably, a judge is going to have to weigh in on and make the decision. Most of the folks I talk to in college sports don't think that it's going to be don't think they're going to be stopped from spending the kind of money on football and basketball that they want to spend. But they've been wrong in courtrooms before. So I think until that's settled, everyone will be a little bit nervous about how that distribution of the big pot of money is going to go.
Did they maybe barrel through Title IX a little bit and wait to clear it up on the back end, especially given the fact that the administration has changed in the middle of all this as well, and the department that enforces Title IX is very much under question whether it will exist in a couple years or not?
Yeah, that's right. The Department of Education under the President Trump's administration is certainly not quite as robust as it was in past administrations, and may not exist at all at some point in the future if he has his way, based on some reports. I think that's part of the issue with the NCAA is they don't want this to be a moving target. They don't want every time there's a new president or a new political party that comes into power, they don't want to have to adjust their rules and adjust their budgets. They need something that's a little bit more set in stone, and that'll probably come through some type of legal battle in the courts. But until then, there's going to be a bit of unrest. And when you asked about sort of slow playing it, there's a bit of that. There's a bit of the legal nuance of working through this settlement, where basically the Title IX law doesn't apply to the legal questions that the judge for this settlement had to handle. So this particular judge really didn't have the authority to make a decision on Title IX. It was always going to be something that had to be sorted out afterwards.
The first check that's cut, and I know that every school might cut them all at the same time. I don't know if it's going to be like a wire or an actual physical check. How much will that be worth in the NCAA museum or for people who have covered this sport for as long as we have?
I certainly hope somebody has a nice ceremony with those oversized comic, like Happy Gilmore style checks that they're cutting to their quarterback or something like that. I imagine these days most of it goes through Venmo or direct deposit or something a lot less fun, but hopefully there'll be some ceremony for a big one at some point. I'd hang that up on the office wall at some point.
Dan Wetzel was on with us last week, and obviously now with ESPN, on college sports has always been a business. The House settlement just made it even more of a business. Who gets the money, et cetera, competitive ballots, whatever. Do you feel like that this will bring back also cheating inside NCAA football or other programs?
It's a good question. So basically, what they're trying to do as part of the settlement, the school's going to be paying players, and what they're trying to stop is the boosters and the collectives that have sprung up over the last 4 or 5 years to pay, what are on paper NIL deals, but in reality, they're just salary payments to players. the NCAA and the schools are hoping to stop that practice. And if they are successful in stopping boosters and collectives from paying players via NIL deals, the boosters and collectives are going to find another way to pay them. And that might be sticking money back into duffel bags. It might be setting up parents with jobs. But basically, there is enough market demand and enough value out there in trying to recruit the best football players you can that it's not going to top off the $20 million mark that schools have set for their cap right now. So whether it's through sort of legitimate NIL deals that the schools help to facilitate, or whether it's going back to old days of sticking money in a shoebox, that money's going to flow to players one way or the other.
Dan, you wrote a book. I think John Barr also was a part of the book about Larry Nassar and that horrific story. How long were you working on that? And really, how difficult was it to write about what you had learned?
Sure. Yeah, it's certainly a different world than the college sports stuff I've been covering for the past couple of years. But we write a lot about legal issues on the group that I'm a part of. So that one was several years in the making. A lot like the NCAA issue. It's one of those things that you learn more and more as you go, and it slowly leaks out. But yeah, that was definitely a career-changing and life-changing experience for me to get to watch a lot of that unfold and watch the women who eventually put Larry Nassar behind bars for the rest of his life, watch them sort of rise up and take back control of something that had been robbed of them.
What is your what story are you looking forward to most following and writing about when it comes to the actual season coming up, Dan?
Well, yeah, it would be great to see a couple games. I think it's going to be really interesting to see who rises to the top in this new world where you can construct a roster overnight. How that all plays out is going to be fascinating, I think, in the years ahead. I think there are a lot of different ways you can go about building a roster right now. And so you'll have folks who want to spend, most of their money on a superstar quarterback, or folks that might want to spend all their money on a defense or whatever it may be. There's this brand new sort of opportunity. If you're a little bit nerdy and into the Moneyball stuff like I am, there will be a whole bunch of different strategies coming out of the gates here because there's no proven best way to do it yet. And seeing which one of those succeed and which one of those fail on the field is something I'm going to be really excited to see in both football and basketball, I think, in the coming year.
Well, remember when Deion went to Colorado, people were clutching their pearls because he wanted to basically just eliminate the entire roster, bring a few people with him. And now that just seems like, okay, somebody else is doing that.
Yeah, a lot of the things that seemed totally unacceptable even 4 or 5 years ago in the world of college sports are suddenly commonplace and within the rules. I do think it's interesting that with this new setup, schools are going to have contracts with their players. And I've seen a handful of these contracts already, and a lot of them are going to be designed to try to disincentivize, to dissuade players from getting in the transfer portal. So while the settlement doesn't directly deal with transfers, I do think it potentially slows down the type of transfer portal traffic we've seen, where you've got players sticking around for a season, sometimes even less, before trying to jump to the next place to get a better deal.
Dan, thank you very much, buddy. Appreciate you jumping on with us today. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, guys. Good talking to you.
Dan Murphy, ESPN.